We better get this thing up and get out of here. The ice is waiting for us.
July 17th, 1986. Jeff McGinnis and Mike Bedell, a couple of guys from Ontario out for a summer sail. But this is not Ontario cottage country. It's the Mackenzie River in the Canadian Arctic. That water is freezing. McGinnis and Bedell want to make the record books. They are going to be the first to conquer the Northwest Passage using only sail power. They will travel 3,200 miles, sometimes through ice-clogged waters, from Inuvik on the Mackenzie to Pond Inlet on Baffin Island. For centuries, the adventurers and the foolhardy have been following this same route.
For just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea.
Sir John Franklin was going to do it in 1847. He died trying, and he took 120 men, his entire crew, with him. It was commerce, not adventure, which brought the first explorers to the passage in 1576. A shorter route to the Orient meant a bigger profit margin. Today, the length of the passage is full of place names honoring the men who fought these treacherous waters and lost. Martin Frobisher, John Davis, William Baffin, and Captain James Cook. The first to make it was a Norwegian, Roald Amundsen, in 1909. He used engines as well as sail, and it took him 3 years.
Through a land so wide and savage, and make a Northwest Passage to the sea.
Jeff McGinnis is not only sailing in the wake of past adventures, he's also following in his father's footsteps. Dr. Joe McGinnis is better known as an Arctic explorer and deep sea diver than a physician. He's been traveling to the far north for more than 2 decades, and he has often taken his son along. Jeff is 12 years old on this voyage. He was a teenager in 1981 when his father went in search of the Breadalbane, the 500-ton ship which disappeared while trying to find the doomed Franklin expedition. The McGinnises found the Breadalbane and filmed it on the ocean floor. Jeff McGinnis, now 23, is a third-year business student at the University of Western Ontario. This polar passage began as a class project. Jeff had to plan it, promote it, and hustle up sponsors to pay for it. The cost, $100,000. Is this the way for the kid to outdo the old man? Is this the Breadalbane?
I'll let him answer that one. I mean, I don't know.
What? Is there a bit of that?
Well, I certainly can't answer for Jeff, but from my point of view, I got to tell you, it's one of the nicest things that a father could ask for. I mean, here, after 25 years working in the ocean, he comes along and says, I'd like to do something that's different from anything you've ever done. And I would have never dreamed of this. And then he sets aside all the plans and does this and all the preparations and so on, and he asked me for some help. And so for me, it's a kind of way to pass the flame a little bit. And I find that very exciting.
Jeff's partner, photographer Mike Bedell, also has a strong attachment to the North. His numerous Arctic trips have resulted in a book of photographs. For Bedell, the challenge of the Northwest Passage was something he couldn't pass up.
It's a very light craft, and I think with a bigger boat, we wouldn't go very far. But with this type of craft, I think there's an excellent chance of us being the first to do it.
The boat is a small, fairly vulnerable boat in the ice, and it's also one of the remotest, harshest places in the world, and that's definitely a concern.
Has anybody come close to making it the way you're going to?
Not in such a small boat and not with sail power alone. It's been accomplished using motor power in several years, and from all the research we've done, we've never heard of anyone trying to do it this way or been able to do it like the early explorers wanted to do it, and the only way they could do it with their sails.
McGinnis and Bedell are confident. They believe their 18-foot twin-hull boat will give them a tremendous advantage over the sailors who went before them in their cumbersome ships. This 450-pound sailboat can be pulled ashore whenever the ice threatens to crush in. The barren Tuck Peninsula is alive with all sorts of wildlife, but you can't really see it from a catamaran. So the two men make frequent stops along the way to see the sights and for Bedell to take some pictures.
On the Tuk Peninsula, we saw a lot of caribou, and they were in their full summer splendor with beautiful velvet racks. And then one morning, I was just putting the camp down, and suddenly I saw this huge moving rock, and I took a second take, and it was a big bull muskox, and he was pawing the ground and snorting and getting himself in quite a state. As we moved down the Mackenzie River, we met some really friendly native people from Inuvik, and the people were out hunting beluga whales, and we stopped into a number of camps and were offered whitefish and whale and tea and bannock, and it was really heartwarming to meet these people and see them still pursuing a traditional lifestyle.
This is where the Mackenzie River meets the Beaufort Sea. It's time to take on more provisions. McGinnis and Biddell pull out of the water here at the Inuvialuit village of Tuktoyaktuk.
The kids were fascinated with the kayak, of course, a traditional craft that we had along, but now is made out of plastic and quite indestructible. And the kids were just dying to get in it and play around. So when we were in Tuktoyaktuk, there were kids almost in line to get into the kayak and take it for a spin.
When they leave Tuk, they leave the good weather behind. The winds are becoming stronger, the ice is starting to close in. There's an eerie feeling as they enter the Amundsen Gulf and come upon the remains of an abandoned trawler beached on the rocks. No time to dwell on it, though. Just down the shoreline, there's always something to keep the spirits up.
One of the really fascinating areas were the Smoking Hills, and it's a place where there's shale deposits and coal. When oxygen hits this material, it actually ignites, and there's this area of 60 or 70 miles where the smoke is just flowing out of these hills.
So far, the boat takes everything the passage throws at it. But this is not the ordinary catamaran you pick up at the local sporting goods store. The hull's underside is made of the same material as bulletproof vests. But this state-of-the-art equipment can't do the impossible. When the ice moves, they don't. Sometimes they're stuck for days, sometimes for hours.
The wind had howled for almost 18 hours, and there was no way we could go anywhere. The waves were smashing up against this island, and the salt spray was shooting 30 feet in the air, and the waves were just too big for us to go anywhere safely.
It's August, but the temperature never goes above -8 degrees Celsius. The winds make it even colder. Trying to keep warm, the men huddle in their tent. They pass the time relaxing, snacking on freeze-dried food, and updating their journals. But when the weather is right and the ice opens up, they sail, sometimes as much as 100 miles a day. But they can't allow themselves to become too confident as they fly over the water. Yesterday, the ice packs and the jutting cliffs were forbidding. Today, the passage is permitting them through, and they feel invincible. They don't stop. Even at midnight, there's still enough light to sail. It may all change tomorrow. It's now September. McGinnis and Biddell have been on the water for almost 40 days. They're supposed to be in Pond Inlet by now. They're only halfway there, but the weather is making it impossible to go on. For most of the voyage, the men have been alone. There is a radio aboard, and they have been keeping the DuLine stations along the way informed of their progress. Now they make one last call to the Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker, the Martha S. Black. The ship's helicopter gives us a lift to where the men are camped just a few miles from Cambridge Bay. There is still a lot of water between them and Pond Inlet. They're glad to see us, but this is not a celebration. They know they're not going to make it.
It's freezing.
Did you bring any food for us? I'm starving.
I didn't think of it. I brought nothing.
Not even a granola bar. We're out of granola bars. Been out for about 2 weeks.
This is it? This is all that you had to sleep in?
This is home.
It's a long way from Toronto and the conversation we had on that sunny day. You seem very confident then.
I was,
Be
I
honest
wasn't.
now. You weren't?
I wasn't. I had a lot of reservations, and I realize now that they were justifiable, and the Arctic is a very harsh place that you have to be really careful in.
Given your reservations and how it's turned out, do either of you feel perhaps it was overambitious, ill-advised?
Sometimes, but for the most part, I think we kept it within control. I'm glad we're approaching the end of the summer, though.
Summer! I can't say the word summer and stand here. I mean, the original dream, Mike, was to cross the Northwest Passage with wind and muscle.
Right.
You only got halfway. Do you feel you failed?
Not at all. We did our very best, and we're looking forward to next year to completing it. The ice dictated that we couldn't make it all the way this year, and we did our very best to make it as far as we could, and we're very pleased with the section that we did do.
Was most of the trip under conditions like this? It's freezing, it's cold, it's windy, it's unpleasant?
It's all your mental state, but I guess the last 6 or 7 days we've had snow for part of the day. You can tell winter is definitely coming in. It hasn't been quite as windy as this all the time, but it's been pretty severe.
You were out there alone. Did you have any situation at all where you really were frightened, where it was dangerous?
The last couple of days we've been coming up through some huge swells. We were in a place called Starvation Cove a few days ago, aptly named, and the wind was howling, and we set out, and we were going through huge swells coming out through a constriction, and our hulls were just bouncing up and down, and it was kind of a classic fearsome situation where we were just, at our kind of on the edge of feeling that we should be out there.
It's got to be let down, because had you made it, I mean, the country would have gone nuts.
We would have been more ecstatic, no doubt.
We're a lot further than where we started to making it. So, I think we're 1,200 miles into the passage, and we're solidly, we know we can travel up here. We need a hand with the ice. The conditions have to be fairly good for us, but we know we can travel up here, and I think that we'll be able to generate enough enthusiasm to come back up here and finish what the original dream was.
They set off one last time. Their boat looks small beside the icebreaker. They sail the last few miles into Cambridge Bay. Part of the Coast Guard's job is to keep an eye out for any craft in these treacherous Arctic waters. But Captain Robert Mellis doesn't want to encourage any daredevils.
We only have 6 icebreakers in the Arctic. If there's vessels that run into trouble, it's unlikely that we'll necessarily have a ship at the right location at the right time to be able to respond to an emergency.
Do you understand why they do it?
Oh, yes. Sure, I think that's the kind of spirit that led to discoveries. That's how we ended up with a North America instead of a Europe that was the only part of the Earth at one time. So, you need people to have the adventurous spirit to make the discoveries. I mean, that's what we're doing out in space right now, hopefully, is that we're discovering things. And we're doing it with adventurous spirits, and it is dangerous.
They did have some close calls along the way. They were cold, they were tired, they were hungry, but not once did they consider giving up. Time and weather just ran out. They have been defeated, but they're not disappointed.
It took the first ship to ever sail through the passage 3 years. They had a motor, it was a big boat. I don't think we have anything to be disappointed about.
It's not quite the triumphal return. There are no dignitaries, no crowds, no applause to greet them as they pull out of the water in Cambridge Bay. McGuinness and Bedell did not sail into history. Not this summer.